This is Interstate 75 with rush hour traffic coming from Atlanta. And this is Canton Road, which has very little traffic during rush hour and is a great alternative to get around the traffic in Atlanta. So let's take a look at some of the most congested roads in Metro Atlanta and talk about the best ways to avoid the dreaded traffic. To really be able to avoid some of the worst traffic in Atlanta, you should know how the interstate system works here in Atlanta. Unfortunately, the interstate roads that are here in Georgia and in Atlanta were probably good 50, 60 years ago, but now with the amount of people that have moved here to Metro Atlanta, the population that we have here has really outgrown the interstate system here. And so that's really one of the main causes for the traffic here. In Georgia, we have I-75, which runs diagonally through the state, and we also have I-85, which runs diagonally in the other direction through the state of Georgia. And those two major interstates that run through Georgia unfortunately meet right in the middle of the busiest part of Georgia, right there near Midtown in Atlanta. In addition to that, we also have Highway 400, which really looks just like an interstate and is just as used as an interstate, and it runs north and south from cities like Alpharetta and Roswell down and connects to 7585 right there at Midtown in Atlanta. Also, we have I-20, which runs east and west through the state of Georgia. It also happens to connect to all of those other major interstates in Atlanta, right there in the same spot, right around Midtown. So that part of Midtown Atlanta is like the worst. It is a hot mess 24/7. That's the part of Metro Atlanta that you want to try to avoid at all costs. We'll talk about a few different hot spots there in Metro Atlanta and how to avoid those traffic congested areas, but to avoid that 7585 and Highway 400 and I-20 cluster there in the middle of Atlanta, the best way to avoid that traffic is to use Interstate 285. Interstate 285 is sometimes called the perimeter or the bypass, and it was created for just that, to kind of bypass the city of Atlanta. It goes in a circle around the city of Atlanta and is oftentimes used for truck drivers to be able to skip the city of Atlanta, not have to get into that traffic, but it's also open to the public. Anybody can use Interstate 285, and really it's commonly used by the locals here of Atlanta to get around that middle of Atlanta traffic. And one of the best parts about 285 is that there's no speed limit.
Wait a minute!
Huh. Oh, there is. Oh, well, I've just been informed there is a speed limit on 285. Apparently it's 65 miles an hour, which is super surprising because everybody speeds on 285. It's so common to see cars flying by you there on 285, trying to get around that middle of Atlanta traffic and trying to bypass the city of Atlanta, because Interstate 285 really is a great alternative to get around that 75-85 traffic in the middle of Atlanta. But keep in mind, there are a lot of trucks on that road, a lot of semi-trucks, because it's mainly used by those semi-trucks. So if you're going to use 285 to get around the city of Atlanta, just be aware that sometimes I think some people can kind of be nervous or afraid of being around all those semi-trucks, and the semi-truck drivers do use 285 a lot. So certainly something to keep in mind if you're going to use 285. Another road in Metro Atlanta that has a lot of traffic is Highway 400, and it goes north and south to cities like Roswell and Alpharetta and down into Sandy Springs, especially right around the intersection of Highway 400 and 285. There's always a lot of bad traffic there. There's has been construction going on there for approximately 1,000 years, and I think there will be construction going on there for another 1,000 years. So because of that, the congestion there and the amount of traffic around that intersection 400 and 285 is always terrible. And so certainly a part of Metro Atlanta that you really want to try to avoid. A great alternative for Highway 400 is Highway 9. Highway 9 runs parallel to Highway 400 and also goes through many of those same cities, Alpharetta and Roswell and Johns Creek. But the thing about Highway 9 is that there's a lot of intersections with lights at that road. So it can be kind of stop and go, but very often it's much easier to travel on that road than it is to travel on Highway 400. Not only does Highway 9 travel up to Alpharetta, even up as far as the city of Cumming, but it travels down to the middle of Atlanta, right around Midtown. I believe it goes right by Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. So it's a great alternative not only to avoid Highway 400, but also to avoid some of that 75-85 traffic as well. In fact, years ago when I was a first responder in that area there around Fulton County, we would often drive the ambulance on Highway 9 instead of Highway 400, knowing that Highway 9 was a much easier road to navigate and to avoid the traffic on Highway 400. Another road that is notorious for having terrible traffic is Interstate 85, which runs north through the cities of Norcross, Duluth, and Suwanee. This is a major interstate, so it's very common to have a lot of traffic on this road. As we've talked about many times on this channel before, one of the reasons for the amount of traffic that we have on the interstates is because the suburbs are really much more populated than the city of Atlanta. And when people live in the suburbs and then work in the city of Atlanta, it's very common for there to be a lot of rush hour into the city of Atlanta in the mornings and then back out to the suburbs in the evening as people are going home from work. And that's the very thing that happens on Interstate 85 coming from the city of Suwanee down to the city of Atlanta. Because the cities of Suwanee and Duluth and Norcross are so popular, that interstate has a lot of traffic during rush hour right there on that section of Interstate 85. A great alternative for getting around that Interstate 85 traffic is Buford Highway and Peachtree Industrial Boulevard if you're getting to an area that is north of Interstate 85. And then if you need to get to somewhere south of Interstate 85, you could take Lawrenceville Highway. All of these roads run parallel to Interstate 85 and are much easier and much lighter than Interstate 85. Now, of course, some of these roads can at times and will at times have traffic on them, but they're just not typically as bad as the interstate. To get to the city of Atlanta from Buford during rush hour traffic, you're really looking at an hour to an hour and a half commute one way. And some of these alternative routes will certainly save a lot of time during rush hour. Another road that is terrible for having traffic is Barrett Parkway in Marietta and in Kennesaw. The reason there's a lot of traffic on Barrett Parkway is because that's really one of the most popular areas of Marietta. There's a lot of commercial spaces there, lots of restaurants. There's also Interstate 85, also Interstate 75 and Interstate 575 intersect with Barrett Parkway, which is another reason why so many people use Barrett Parkway. To get around that traffic on Barrett Parkway, Highway 41 is a much better road for trying to avoid the traffic and trying to cut some time on your commute. In general, a few tips to try to avoid the traffic in Atlanta is things like trying to live inside the perimeter but work outside the perimeter. Many people live outside of the perimeter, outside of 285, but work in the perimeter, work around the city of Atlanta, and so that's what causes that rush hour traffic. But if you are doing the opposite, if you live in the city of Atlanta, for example, but work outside of the perimeter, that would be a great way to avoid that rush hour traffic. Also in Metro Atlanta, it's very possible to work in the same city that you live in. Many people will ask, like, if I live in the city of Marietta, will I have to travel to another city to get to different things, like maybe a job or different services or different places that I would need to go to? And the answer is no. Everything that you might need in this specific suburb that you live in, you can find typically in that suburb. So it's very possible to work in the same suburb that you live in, and that would certainly help out to be able to avoid that traffic on the interstate system. And then a big one that helps out with avoiding the traffic is avoiding the roads that intersect with the interstate systems. So for example, Barrett Parkway intersects with 75 and 575, and that's really one of the reasons why there's so much traffic on Barrett Parkway. If you can avoid the roads that intersect with those interstate systems or have those on and off ramps of the interstates, that would also cut down a ton on your time and help avoid the traffic. And then a really big help for avoiding the traffic in Metro Atlanta is that the south side of Metro Atlanta sometimes does not have quite as much traffic as the north side, because the north side of Metro Atlanta has a bit higher of a population. You can kind of expect there to be less traffic on the south side. Now, of course, there are certain parts of the south side that have a lot of traffic, but generally speaking, there tends to be less traffic on the south side of Metro Atlanta. If you want to know more about the best suburbs to live in Metro Atlanta, check out this video. I'll see you there.